Hello, my name is Lorenz Cervantes. I'm a psychologist, researcher, and lecturer at the University of the Philippines in Diliman. I was invited by Dr. Andrea Negrete of the Wesleyan University, so thank you, Dr. Negrete, for inviting me to speak to your students. And thanks also for opening the door to a discussion of indigenous psychology. I wish I could speak in person or at least live, but due to the difference in time zone, I hope this recorded video would suffice. So what is this? This is a discussion on my recently published article, Kaluluwa Kapwa Kalikasan, Mental Health Implications of Filipino Folk Beliefs, which was published in APA's Spirituality in Clinical Practice. And I'm assuming that if you're watching this already, it means that you've already read the paper and that you already have some thoughts on it. In this discussion, I will just be kind of echoing what's already in the paper, but also I'll be adding some more implications, maybe to help really ground this understanding in everyday experience, and also connecting it to why I wrote it in the first place and where I'm coming from personally. So I've always been interested in magic and mythology, and this interest started in childhood. My grandfather's hallway was filled with books on mysticism and psychic experiments. I spent a lot of my childhood afternoons in his house and just reading these books. But also, it's fascinating because even at that time, I understood that, this is part of my reality. Because spirits are part of the lived experience of many Filipinos. It's common for a lot of us to know someone who sees spirits. I know a lot of people who see spirits. A lot of them are really close to me. A lot of them are friends, relatives, and that it's just this... They're functional members of society, but at the same time they are very much in tune with, if you want to call it, the vibes of a place, or they're very sensitive to the things around them. I even know people who have been courted by spirits, meaning that these spirits, fell in love with them or whatever it is. They were obsessed with these people. And this is something that you will also see in ethnographic literature, with spirits getting obsessed with mortals and the mortals going mad because of the obsession of these spirits. And there are also places in the Philippines where, especially mountains like Mount Banahaw, sacred spaces, where these spiritual experiences are way more focused. So it's important to really listen to the instructions of these guides, of the guides that you have there. Well, I also know, I know a foreigner who told me this story. He doesn't know any of these. He doesn't know any of these, folkloric elements or whatever it is. He doesn't know these stories. Doesn't know what they're called. But one afternoon, he told me that he was fixing his garden, and then he suddenly got sick. He couldn't stand up. He had difficulties getting out of bed. And the people told him that, hey, you go down the street, there's a folk healer there. And so he went. And before he even explained what happened to him, the folk healer asked him, did you fix your garden recently? And then he said, yeah. And apparently, if you believe this, he apparently accidentally covered the entrance of a spirit's house in the garden. So the folk healer told him to lay out a peace offering, a plate of food, and a glass of drink, whatever it is. So he did, and the next day he got better. Someone ate the food and someone drank from the glass. But he was thinking, if it was a dog or whatever animal, then it would be hard to drink from the glass without the glass tipping over. Diba? But these stories, he doesn't know any of these. So if you think of folklore as something that emerges from cultural experience, it's kind of hard to explain things like these, where it's like this is a foreigner who doesn't know who wasn't raised with the cultural experience of these beliefs. So how was he affected by these things? It's just a question mark, you know. A lot of these superstitions, what we call them today, you know, superstitions, they're really just atrophied versions of what was once a potent spirituality, right? If you think of how culture was shaped, there's a theory there that culture is how people interact with their environments. So if a community figures out, oh, this environment works best if we do this and that, it allows us to survive in this environment and so on. These so-called superstitions were just, you know, passed on through generations because that's the best way to survive in an environment such as this. So for example, if a community was living or adapting to cold weather, then part of their culture might involve fur coats or whatever beautiful coats that they might have. So this is culture. And in terms of superstition, it may have just been, oh, you know, these were beliefs that worked for some reason. They didn't know how. But in lay theorizing, the theorization of common folk, it just worked, and they just kept doing it because that's what worked. And as the world shifted and changed, and today, you know, it's more urbanized, then maybe the superstitions that used to work, or at least the beliefs that used to work, no longer work as well. You know, so there's that. But then again, there's also beliefs of, for example, if a spoon falls, then you're gonna have a female visitor. So there's, you know, there are these beliefs. But I grew up with a lot of these superstitions, some of which have become common knowledge to the point that I didn't even realize that they were superstitions. So I was reading this fantastic book by Dr. Michael Tan on folk healing and folk illnesses. And as I was reading, I was thinking, oh, wow, this is, I didn't know that this was a folk belief. I thought it was just medical knowledge. For example, if a person gets sick and we know that the day before they were out in the rain, and we say, oh, naulanan kasi. That's because they got wet in the rain. So there's a belief somehow that rainwater, even if it's just a drizzle, will get you sick. You'll get colds, or you'll start coughing, feel sickly or feverish. So we say, oh, it's because naulanan. But we know, scientifically speaking, that you can only get sick because of the germs or whatever it is that's around you. And yet, this belief persists even today. So it's very common, for example, to tell a person or to tell your boss that you can't come in because you're sick, kasi naulanan, because you got wet in the rain. Another thing that I thought was just, you know, medical fact is called pasma, which is when I was a child, when I was a student, grade school, I would write I love writing and I love drawing, so I would write and draw, and they would tell me not to wash my hands immediately after exerting physical effort because I'd get pasma, which I always understood to be shaky, sweaty hands or palms. So it's interesting. Another water-related thing. There is a superstition that you're not supposed to take a bath right before you sleep, because if you sleep with wet hair, you'll go insane. There's that belief. Or you'll go blind or sick or whatever it is. There's another one that's called lamig. And here I'm trying to translate a lot of these experiences because a lot of these experiences are actually intuitively understood already. So bear with me as I try to translate them. Lamig is when you go get a massage and you feel tension in your body. That's called lamig. Lamig means cold. It's the hardening of bad air that enters your body. So for example, if you were there's another one, water related also. It's called natuyuan ng pawis, which is when your sweat dries on your skin, and that could get you sick. That could also lead to lamig, because if you leave your back, if your back is exposed and it got wet or whatever it is, or some bad air blew on it, it would get stuck in your muscles, and that's called lamig. And so the person who does the massage has to break up the lamig in your body. And it's still understood today. I mean, you go to spas and the person who's doing the massage might comment on, oh, it's a lamig. So it's still common knowledge. So I grew up with really a fascination in the supernatural, to the point that my graduate studies really focused on the paranormal. I studied telepathy in psychotherapy. Telepathy is just a term that we use, that in the movies, it's you see things or you hear voices, but it doesn't really work that way in reality. I mean, for some really gifted people, maybe. But telepathy is more of sensing vibes. And it happens in psychotherapy in the sense that the therapist might say something and then the client would go, oh, I was just thinking that. It happens in regular conversations as well. So this paper was also published last year. And it was inspired by the work of Father Jaime Bulatao, who was a priest psychologist. He was trained abroad. He's known for using folk healing techniques in his clinical practice. So he understood that even though we have clinical terms for a variety of symptoms, it's still so important to contextualize the treatment. We can't just tell a person that, hey, this is this and that, because these are foreign concepts that we're just applying onto them. We already have an intuitively understood framework or worldview that influences our behavior and our understanding of all these illnesses or whatever it is. So he was the founder also of the Department of Psychology in Ateneo de Manila University, which is where I graduated for my undergraduate studies as well as my graduate studies. So he's also one of the pillars of, or one of the pioneers really, of Filipino psychology, Filipino indigenous psychology. And so this is, I shifted my attention eventually into the psychology of local supernatural phenomena. From general interest in magic, mythology, and the paranormal, I shifted it to local experiences. And this is the general study. This general study is my niche. I float through the fields of transpersonal psychology, indigenous psychology, partly also parapsychology. In fact, I've written a paper on Philippine parapsychology, which was published also last year. And I presented a framework for understanding supernatural experiences, what we call kababalaghan, which just refers to things that are mysterious. Now, this framework is similar to what I wrote in the paper that you read. So let's talk about the paper that you read. If we think of mental health is opposed to physical health. You see, there's a subtle distinction there between mind and body, as it has always been a subtle distinction there. But you'll see, as we discuss this, that this separation of mind and body is not something that is a focus in Filipino well-being, because in Filipino well-being, the mental health or well-being is embodied, and we'll see it later. But speaking in the language of mental health, you can't remove the individual from their context in culture and society, because if a person is dysfunctional, that really just implies that they exist in a system where there is an expectation of function. So dysfunction implies function. And what is that functionality? If you are in a society that promotes production and consumption, which is most of our modern day living, is that We have to produce in order to consume, in order to produce, and it goes round and round. So in this cycle, in this system, obviously productivity and ambition and competition are the norm. And so you have to catch up, right? You have to be productive. The opposite to that, the dysfunction there is if you're lazy, if you can't get up to do the things that you're supposed to do, to be a functioning member of society. So that's considered dysfunction. And in order to deal with that dysfunction, we medicalize these things and create terms that allow us to get a handle on these dysfunctions. In fact, that's the point of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, diba? It's a statistical report of what dysfunction is. So our personal identity, the point here really is just that our personal identity can't be removed from everything else. And that's what we're starting to understand as we enter into what we call the biopsychosocial paradigm, right? So we define ourselves, practically speaking, based on the way that we navigate the world around us. So if you look at folk beliefs in the Philippines, the superstitions that we grew up with, you'll see that wellness really is just harmony with other people and nature. That's it. And if you look, for example, at the causes of illness, for example, sorcery, or what we call kulam, barang, whatever it is, it's actually illness caused by someone that you offended. So if you offended other people, they might ask a mangkukulam or a sorcerer or whatever it is to. They might hire them to curse you in some way to get you sick. So that's an example of how we're supposed to be in harmony with people, and if we offend others, then they might cause sickness to us. It could be, if you think about it really, it could be a form of somatized guilt, that your guilt was manifested in this way because you know consciously that you offended someone. When we pass through grassy areas or mysterious natural spaces, we say tabi-tabi po. There are multiple variations across the archipelago. Another one is bari-bariapo. So we pass through places, we excuse ourselves, we ask for permission. Tabi-tabi po means, excuse me, please step aside so I don't, hit you or step on you accidentally. The consequence is, if you don't do that, you might be the target of wrath. The spirits might be offended. So it's the nature spirits that would be offended. We have terms like na-encanto, which is, you get sick because of the encanto. They're playing with you, ginahampangan. Another term that we use is a Visayan term called gaba. And gaba, I was born in the Visayas, so I grew up with this threat that if you don't finish your food, if you offend your elders, if you blaspheme, whatever it is, baka gabaan ka. You might get gaba. So gaba is like, the way I understood it growing up is that my stomach might get hurt or whatever it is, but it's actually more like a popular understanding of karma. So we still use, baka makarma, karma mo yan. We still use the term karma to refer to something bad that happens to a person. And we say, that's your karma because you were doing bad stuff. You were offending people and whatever. But you see, originally or traditionally speaking, karma isn't just punishing. It really is just an equivalent to what you did before. So it really is just your own action back at you, referring to a kind of cosmic system, which is the same with gaba. But gaba is more about punishment, right? So if you offended spirits, if you offended God, or if you offended nature, or you didn't take care of nature, you whatever it is, transgress the social norm, then you might be a victim of gaba. So if a natural disaster befalls, sometimes people would explain that as, the people there were sinful, so it's gaba. So there's these meaning making. There's some meaning making surrounding that. So if you go to a folk healer, like the foreigner in my earlier story did, if you go to a folk healer, the first question would really just be, what did you do or who did you offend? Right? So they would try to identify what is needed to appease the spirit or return the illness to the sorcerer. Just a few weeks ago, I was speaking I was in Negros Island. I was speaking to a Soruano, which is the folk healer, folk practitioner. So during my conversation, I realized that they didn't focus too much on the terms or concepts or whatever it is, as long as it's understood. And in fact, today, kasi there's a lot of people who try to reclaim the term kulam, or it's not so bad, but actually, kulam really is just the term that we use to refer to harmful magic, and that's it. That's just a term. So in fact, the Soruano that I spoke to used the term halit, and halit in Hiligaynon does not necessarily mean magical whatever or supernatural things. Halit really is just something bad that happened. It's like referring to curses and hexes as bad juju or whatever it is, or bad vibes or whatever. It's just a term that you use. So healing is just returning this halit back to its sender. Halit is just anything bad. It could be caused by spirits, by people, by other Soruanos. It's caused by intention. A person can be envious of another person. They could cause halit. And how does it work? The Soruano explained it to me in this way. She tapped the table and then pointed at me and then said, "Oh, the vibration that I cause with my tapping reaches you." And how it manifests on your end could be anything. Could be you could get sick in any way, whatever it is. But the Soruano would know that's a halit caused by my pulong, which is intention. So just know that all of that, all the paper that you read, it's not a medical paper. It's not it's not meant for medical treatment. But so use it with your own discernment. But we understand that internalized beliefs shapes our engagement with the world and other people. It actually does influence our well-being. The way that we understand the system is the way that it manifests through our dysfunction, through our functionality. As I mentioned earlier, we're only dysfunctional, or so-called, in our mental health if we know what function looks like. So there's already an assumption. By saying there's dysfunction, we know that there's a function. In the same way that if we have these superstitions about, oh, don't do this, don't do that, we're assuming that there is a supposed thing that we're supposed to be doing, or a supposed state of being, which is harmony with other people, right? And with nature. So, in fact, the way we treat spirits is the same way that we treat other people, with respect and dignity. Right? We tell them, excuse me, I'm passing through. In the same way that I wouldn't just charge through a crowd of people. Diba? So, we respect boundaries by honoring the land, which is spirit territory. We are careful. And we are also careful in our social engagement because we wouldn't want to accidentally offend a mangkukulam or a Soruano or someone who knows a Soruano. So superstitions are said to be, fear-based because, it's don't do this, or you're supposed to do this, or else that. And so a lot of us, we say, you have to grow up and, let go of these old beliefs. And we even say that, religion, grow up, whatever it is. But these beliefs are actually just these are our connections to the world. These beliefs connect us to the world. They are tentative symbols that we use to easily access shared inner realities. We don't have to believe in the spirits, but we have to know what they imply. So ironically, a person can't really fully connect with the world in a purely rational way. We know this. We know that somehow You could stand on a cliff and look at the horizon and feel a connection with infinite space. But you can't just say that. Even if you can say it, it would be extremely poetic. And for a lot of, strictly materialist mindset people, they would look at poetry and think that it's useless. Or at least, that it's not a complete and measurable way of understanding the world. But a lot of these things really are just, philosophically speaking, there's always a way to disprove or invalidate any ethical belief or practice surrounding our treatment of people and nature. It's always relative. So if we're able to understand the world, and modern science has given us so much power in terms of understanding, the structure of these things and how these things interact and how whatever it is. So we're able to control reality, manipulate it to create our own reality. That's wonderful. But without the faith, the belief, the superstition or spirituality surrounding these things, the meaning making that we have, without that, we can just do whatever we want. And doing whatever we want implies that it could be unsustainable. So it's the spiritual that bridges the gap of what is unsaid yet is intuitively understood. I don't have to believe that I might be stepping on little spirits when I walk around in the garden, but asking for permission is my way of being mindful about my place in the world. There's a humility in ancestral wisdom that is somewhat lacking in the way that we exploit people and resources today. We suffer mentally and physically despite having access to virtually anything. And you can order almost anything. Yet it's the intuitive simplicity of connecting with the world, of groundedness in nature and authentic connection with people that keeps us healthy. Empirical studies have confirmed that the importance of spending time with nature, of treating people nicely, community care and genuine connection are protective factors in the face of loneliness, addiction, and other psychological issues. It's the communal aspect. It's the communal healing. Diba? So a lot of these things, we think about, and we can't just remove the person from their context. So if ever we think about mental health or mental conditions, we have to understand what they imply and what system they're coming from that helps define or shape what we consider to be dysfunctional. Okay? So thanks again. And thanks again, Dr. Negrete, for inviting me to speak to your students. And I hope this brief discussion was useful or helpful to you. I also share my research on social media via Psikodiwa, which is a combination of the words psikolohiya or psychology and diwa, which means consciousness. I also have a blog where I write my essays. I offer online lectures for those interested in going deeper. Okay, so that's it. Take care and good luck.